We are again for another Lawyer Up Friday here at Nation of Immigrants. Thank you for tuning in. We're going to talk about an interesting article that I found on Forbes. Trump plans far-reaching set of new immigration regulations. We're going to talk about what these regulations mean, um, and kind of just it's a bird's eye view of what's happening on immigration from the Trump administration in particular. And so I'm excited to kind of go over it and then talk about how this is not the way that immigration law and policy should be put into effect. So let's get started. Thanks again, Nation of Immigrants.
You're listening to Nation of Immigrants.
America is a nation of immigrants.
A podcast about U.S. immigration law with your host, Jacob Tingen.
Okay, well, so here we are talking about how not to reform our nation's immigration laws, and I think it's an important conversation to have because if there's one thing that we agree on in immigration, everybody, is that something's got to give, something has to change, something needs to be done, and the disagreements are on what exactly needs to be done. So I get that, and I understand that there are a wide variety of viewpoints. What's important is people are also disagreeing about certain facts. So we've talked about that on this show, that there are, for example, there are a lot of accusations that many of the people coming across our southern border are merely economic migrants, whereas many people of us who work with immigrants on a daily basis will tell you that it's not just economic migrants. These people are fleeing for their lives. I mean, this is a life and death situation, not a money situation. But lately, as I've been talking, I just want to point out, like, what's so bad if they are coming for economic opportunity? And I did read an interesting article the other day that proposed, it was by an economist, that essentially proposed that, what's so bad about having borders that are a little more open? And maybe one of these days we'll talk about that too. But what I wanted to tackle first was this article from Forbes, Trump plans far-reaching set of new immigration regulations. I was curious to see if there was anything I hadn't heard about. There were a couple of things that this article updated me on, and I kind of wanted to walk down it and talk about each of these visas and these regulations. And I think you'll see a current theme, and the author of the article did as well. He kind of adds a plug there at the end of the article. So let's just kind of go down through it. Again, this is a Forbes article. I'll just give props to the author, Stuart Anderson, for putting all of this together. So it's interesting. So H-1B visas is looking at some new rules and regulations. So if you're not aware of what H-1B visas are, it's one of those that has been highly criticized by Donald Trump. And the H-1B visas are essentially work visas. They're considered non-immigrant visas because they're not permanent. They don't lead to a green card necessarily. However, they are a dual intent visa. You can come in on an H-1B visa and plan to stay forever. And companies frequently do sponsor immigrants who have come in on an H-1B. They ultimately sponsor them for a green card as well. So that happens. What's interesting is that this article cites that denials of H-1B petitions have increased from 6% to 24%. I can also tell you that RFEs, or also known as requests for evidence, so occasionally they'd see a petition and then say, well, we need more evidence before we make a decision. In the Trump years, requests for evidence, in particular on H-1B petitions, have increased something in the ballpark of 300 to 400%, which is mind-boggling. And we're seeing that in our practice too, that evidence that has been sufficient in the past is apparently no longer sufficient. It's a little crazy. We'll get these requests for evidence for, you didn't submit the right birth certificate, submit this other kind of birth certificate. And then frequently we're just seeing blanket RFEs where after we learned what kind of birth certificate they want, we're like, okay, well, we'll get all the birth certificates that are currently available. We'll send them in, and then we'll still get the RFE back asking for a specific birth certificate, just to give you an example. And we'll look through the packet and say, we sent that. So then we respond to the RFE and we say, we sent that, here it is again. And then, there's no apology, there's no my bad. They get through, they realize that, it was a mistake. But anyway, H-1Bs. So there's a summary of a forthcoming H-1B rule says they plan to revise the definition of specialty occupation to increase focus on obtaining the best and brightest foreign nationals via the H-1B program and revise the definition of employment and employer-employee relationship to better protect U.S. workers and wages. Essentially, they're just going for as much ground as they can cover and as many reasons as possible to deny H-1B visas. One of the interesting uses of the H-1B visa, it's very popular in the tech sector. And so what's interesting here is that there's these internal documents and policy memos kind of implying that many of these tech companies would no longer be able to offer computer programmer positions because the H-1B is typically for, specialty occupations or people with a bachelor's degree, that kind of thing. And the argument in this internal memo is that, well, not all computer programmers have or even need a bachelor's degree. And that's true. So is it a specialty occupation or not? And so the government is arguing that it's not in some of these documents, and it looks like that might be contributing to denial rates and potential policy changes in the area of H-1B visas. But what's interesting is if you're Google, you need somebody with degrees, right? Right? Like you're not just computer programming, you're doing a lot more online than other people. And so it stands to reason that there'd be plenty of jobs available that require not just a computer programmer, not somebody who took a 6-week course, but somebody who has a degree in computer science, So there's definitely room for these companies to say, hey, no, I need these people with these specific degrees. But it's disheartening to see that our own government is fighting progress in an area where why wouldn't we want educated people? Now, I know there are possibly some people that are listening that are saying, well, H-1B is corrupt and people get around things, whatever. Give me some concrete arguments. I'd be happy to talk about it in these videos. Leave some comments and I'll address it later. The H-1B visa has been an area of conflict, but it's just a starting point for today's video. And there's a lot more to continue to discuss. So H-4 work authorization. So if you're the spouse of someone here on an H-1B, you might have an H-4 visa. And typically in the past, you've been able to work with an H-4 visa. Hey, my husband's here or my wife's here and she's got a job. Why can't I work while I'm here as well? And that's been allowed in the past, but the administration is looking at closing that loophole. Again, why would we care? If you're already here with your family and somebody got you a job, why can't your spouse also work? Why can't they contribute to society? Why can't they help make ends meet? These policies don't really truly make sense. Another area where there's some regulations that are being looked at is the L1 visa. These are like intra-company transferees. It looks like USCIS in different policy agendas or memos is looking at adding wage levels to L1 visas, is looking at making it more complicated for people to get, people with specialized knowledge about the operation of a company into the U.S., which is important for multinational companies or companies that want to become multinational. Or imagine this, companies who want to branch out to the U.S. and then hire U.S. workers and create American jobs. This is a common scenario that we see with people as they'll come to us and say, hey, I've got a successful company in my home country. I'd like to bring my products and services to market in the U.S. And, it's not like I'm going to be bringing a lot of employees over, but I own the company or I'm higher up in our company and I want to open a manufacturing plant or I want to open an office and I want to hire U.S. workers who speak English, right? This is normal economic activity, and yet it appears that the Trump administration is trying to depress that. It doesn't make any sense. Another one that bugs me, but I understand is politically hot topic, is student visas and how work relates to student visas. So currently, if you graduate from college, you can typically get 12 to 24 months of OPT, optional practical training, after you graduate. Okay. And these students need OPT because they get a degree and then they get experience in the US. And then if they go back to their home countries, they go back with the degree and experience. And then if they get a job here, maybe they can stick around and stay, right? They can get a job, somebody can sponsor them, and it gives them a window of time and opportunity. It looks like that, and then also the agency itself has declared that there's no negative impact on American workers by allowing students to stick around an extra 12 months to work. But even so, it looks like the administration is keying up, has a proposed rule, and it looks like they're attempting to prevent students from getting OPT, from sticking around afterwards. And they're also trying to set a certain period of time for student visas. Currently, student visa holders come over and they get duration of status for as long as their degree program takes. It looks like DHS is trying to say, well, you've got to finish your degree in 3 years or 4 years, as if nobody ever took 4.5 to 5 years to graduate from college, right? Or, we'll see this often with some student visas. They'll come in for one degree program and then decide, you know what, I'm going to get a master's degree, or I'm going to get a PhD as well. And so basically they're adding complication to the processes that allow people to come, live, study, work here. I personally am of the opinion that it's really just plain dumb to allow people to come here, get a high quality education, get a bachelor's degree or oftentimes a master's degree and a PhD, and then say, you know what, you're not welcome here. Goodbye. Anybody who graduates from a college here in the U.S. should have provisions available to them for them to stick around and potentially just get a green card. You've got a PhD, sweet. Our economy needs you. Stay. Like, that's not a radical idea. Okay. Another issue where regulations have actually come out, they were finalized yesterday, November 21, 2019, EB-5 regulations. So if you're aware of the EB-5 visa, it is a visa. It's called the millionaire visa, right? So if you invest, I guess the new limits are $1.2 to $1.8 million, or $1.3 to $1.8 million. But basically, if you invest more than $1 million in a business here in the United States and create the appropriate number of jobs, I think it's now up to 12 jobs per amount of money invested in kind of entrepreneurial activity here in the U.S., then you can get a green card. Previous to that date, it was $500,000 to $1 million, and the job creation amount was 10 jobs. And so now that's all changed, leading to further areas of complication for EB-5. And then it looks like they're looking at additional regulatory changes to the EB-5 Regional Center program. Regional centers are third-party private entities that get regulatory approval to sponsor EB-5 projects. So a lot of times these investors can pool their money together, and as long as the underlying project creates enough jobs, they can all get the green card. So for example, if you're going to build a shopping mall or office buildings, hotels, there really are a variety of projects that people use EB-5 funds to develop. And this is one that's very personal to me since I actually own a regional center with a partner in Utah. And so it's been difficult for us to go through and watch these regulations unfold and see how they're going to affect our business. And of course, if you're interested in EB-5 visas or investing in a regional center, reach out. Okay, finally, there are a couple of other regulations that are here. Family sponsorship. We've talked about public charge before and all the rules that are coming out from the Trump administration impacting the ability of families to sponsor family members due to the possibility that they might be considered a public charge and that would prevent them from coming to the U.S. What's interesting is that the public charge rule was blocked here in the U.S., but I believe that the Department of State was able to initiate its own rule. And so if you've got a choice between adjustment of status and consular processing, I would do adjustment of status, hands down, because you want to avoid any issues or problems that might come up because of a potential public charge finding. And then additionally, the whole health insurance thing, which we also discussed, which, I believe both of these were blocked by a court, temporarily. So these rules, they seek to limit legal immigration. And one of the big arguments coming out of the Trump administration and coming out of these conservative pundits is, hey, we just want people to do it right. We just want people to do it legally. And then they turn around and make the legal system more constrictive, more difficult, more hard all around generally. And so that claim that we just want you to do it legally rings false, because it is. It's just not true. All right. So There's also looking at regulation on asylum. We've seen this, and they released some information about how they want filing fees to go up for certain kinds of applications. For the first time ever, we would be one of a small number of nations that charges for asylum applications. Currently, we don't charge people to file an application to save their lives, but it looks like we might. And of course, the argument will be, well, but it's a small charge. It's only $50. But that's where it begins. I haven't practiced immigration law a decade yet, but I've already seen fees go up twice. It's never pretty. Some of the application fees go up a great deal. It's very surprising. And so, and that's another thing that people need to understand. It's not like taxpayer dollars are funding the immigration program. Most of it is funded by, from my understanding, is funded by these application fees. But, I guess part of the reason of the increasing of the fees is just a reflection of the volume that they're looking at. But at the same time, I can't help but feel that this $50 asylum fee is an intent to deny asylum protections to people. I read another article that I didn't want to spend today talking about how different immigration hardliners have been appointed to different positions inside our asylum adjudication organization here in the U.S., and how that's leading to a lot of results. I personally have seen some strange results coming out of the asylum office, cases that I know for a fact are very strong cases, not getting the due process that I think they should get. But that shouldn't be surprising, since one of the regulations that is being talked about or proposed is that they want to prevent people from having automatic reconsideration of their application. So if you file in the asylum office with an asylum application and then it gets denied, today you can automatically appeal to have a judge hear your case. I mean, it just happens automatically. It just gets referred to the court. But they want to end that. They want to allow the asylum officers to just deny, and that be the end of it. At least that's my understanding based on what I've been reading here in the news. And of course, there are, other rules that are being looked at and that are being talked about. And, here on this show, I try to stay abreast of a lot of these different developments. I'm happy to continue to talk about some of these things. But what's interesting is that this article says this. This is how it ends. The Trump administration's regulatory agenda on immigration is ambitious and far-reaching. It's an attempt to lock into place changes to immigration policy that cannot be easily undone, regardless of the outcome of the 2020 presidential election. There is one glaring omission from the Trump administration's regulatory agenda, and here's the kicker. Any measure to make it easier for foreign-born individuals to work, study, or live in the United States. And that's a problem, and it's transparently wrong. I mean, any claim that he has that, it's just, I like when people come legally, or I'm doing this for the American economy, there are mountains of reasons that neither of those things are true. It's transparent that all of these regulations are meant to keep immigrants out. And for whatever reason, the conclusion that many people are drawing, and the conclusion that I'm beginning to draw, as well, is that there must be some kind of racial or national impetus against having immigrants come into our country, or at least poor immigrants. And so this is a problem. So the title of today's episode, again, How Not to Create Immigration Law and Policy in the U.S., is this. Obama also took a lot of executive action and exercised a lot of executive power over immigration. And now we see the Trump administration using every single tool in their toolbox: regulatory changes, policy changes, proclamations, just general tone and stance, overzealousness of ICE officials and ICE officers. We're seeing an attack on our immigration system from every angle possible. And the thing is this is the power that we've given the executive branch. I am concluding, and appropriately so, I am concluding that a lot of these actions overreach, because they do. And a lot of these things have been blocked in court because they should be. But what's interesting is that in a very real way, sometimes these issues get to courts and judges say, hey, look, this is the power of the executive branch. This is the power that Congress gave to the president. And so that's my point. This is how not to create U.S. immigration law and policy it should not be created by the president. I understand that immigration, of course, entails certain national security issues and those kinds of things. But that's not the purpose or intent behind any of these regulations. And so I think it's time for Congress, at a minimum, to just take power away from the executive branch on the issue of immigration. They don't even need to change any of the laws, but they could start with saying, you know what? The president doesn't have the power to do this anymore. Because it seems pretty clear to me that the president or the executive branch just has way too much power in this particular area. And the way that they're going about enforcing immigration laws is transparently anti-immigrant and anti-poor immigrant, which again goes to the heart of these public charge rules that were coming out. And again, just that shockingly insensitive reinterpretation of the poem on the Statue of Liberty. Give me you're tired, you're poor, who can stand on their own 2 feet, and that kind of thing that Ken Cuccinelli said. No, America stands for hope, no matter your economic circumstance. So that's it for Nation of Immigrants. If you like what you're hearing, please subscribe here on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Find me on my personal website at jacobtingen.com, where you can also click on the podcast link and choose to donate. We're going to use those funds to help support immigrants' legal funds. And so I enjoy doing this. I enjoy having you around. I enjoy seeing your comments. I'd like to see more of you. And then soon here, probably around the turn of the year, we're also going to be starting a new series of videos where we talk not just about immigration issues, but legal issues generally, as part of an initiative we're doing. The firm kind of excited about some of these things. So thanks again for listening in to Nation of Immigrants, and we will see you around. Have a great Thanksgiving. We'll see you in about a week or so. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Nation of Immigrants.
America is a nation of immigrants.
Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. Watch the live stream on YouTube and Facebook, or visit jacobtingen.com to learn more.